Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for this new edition of Underwater Chats, our impact session, which runs bi-monthly, which we're really excited. Before we get started, if you wish to listen to this conversation in Spanish, please be sure to click the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen so you can listen to this conversation in Spanish. Si desean escuchar esta conversación en español, pueden oprimir el botón de interpretación en la parte inferior de su pantalla y van a poder escuchar a nuestra increíble intérprete Marisa, que nos está apoyando con el idioma el día de hoy. Así que con eso podemos empezar. Ahí está Marisa, muchas gracias. Así que muchas gracias igual a todos los que están uniendo hoy. Por favor, la conversación va a ser en inglés, pero si tienen preguntas, por favor anótenlas en el chat. Si tienen preguntas en español que quieren levantar la mano, quieren contribuir, también y inmediatamente pasamos a traducción. Así que esta sesión es bien interactiva. Okay, so with that, we switch back to English, and this is the main language for today's session as we have Bobby here with us. And, it's a very interactive session. So whenever you guys, if you want to ask questions, either written or, want to raise your hand, be on camera, off camera, and ask the question, this is the space to do so. So however you feel most comfortable in any language, we're here to support that. So, you just go ahead and ask your questions in whatever format you wish. Or even if it's extending the conversation, that is very welcome. So with that, now I give the official welcome to today's session, our Underwater Chats Impact session with Bobby Click. It's our meet and greet. We're incredibly excited for this integrity session for our Underwater Chats Impact session. And we're delighted to announce Bobby as the new integrity officer at Pan Aquatics. And it's just an incredible, incredible step forward for integrity in our continent. So we're truly excited about Bobby joining our team and what that means for integrity and, a lot of different processes happening in the aquatics world for us as well at PAQ. So to start off, I'm going to give, Bobby's formal introduction, and then we start with our conversation. So Bobby Click is an international safeguarding and integrity professional with extensive experience in investigations, education, and policy development. He previously served as Vice President of Response and Resolution at the U.S. Center for Safe Sport and has supported numerous national governing bodies and international federations in building systems to prevent and address abuse and misconduct in sport. Bobby is also an IOC certified safeguarding officer and currently leads Sport Safety EM, a consultancy dedicated to creating safer environments for athletes. In addition to his work with Pan Aquatics, he serves as an appointed arbitrator for Sports Resolutions, the independent dispute resolution service for sport in the United Kingdom. So we're incredibly thrilled to have Bobby on board on our team in this session, which I know you guys are going to have, an incredible time getting to know him, getting to know his background, and also all the incredible things that are going to be happening at PAQ under his leadership and tenure. So thank you so much, Bobby, for being here with us today. How are you? And thank you so much for joining us for this session.
No, absolutely. I appreciate you guys having me. It's always great to get a chance to kind of speak to, the stakeholders in the organization. So yeah, I'm doing great and excited to get a chance to interact with some people today.
Thank you so much, Bobby. And, can you tell us a little bit, also what you envision today's session to be so our audience members are very familiar with the flow of the conversation and, the kinds of things that they can expect during this session?
Yeah, as we treat this as a conversational session, right? We're going to have some questions that hopefully answer things that you guys may be thinking of ahead of time. But I also really hope today to kind of hear from people that are on the session to kind of learn about what they think integrity and safeguarding really means and what's working for them in their space, what may be challenging for them, and where we and as an organization, as Pan Am and myself as the integrity officer can really kind of support you guys, right? I tell people that, integrity and safeguarding really start with conversations, and this is a great place to kind of get that ball rolling. So, whether it's dropping a message in a chat, whether it is shooting me an email afterwards, coming off a mute and just asking a question, like that's really, what I'm hoping for today, right? Give a little bit of groundwork and then have some interactions with those who are on the call.
Yeah, exactly. So that's exactly what we're going to do today. And we're going to start off that conversation very underwater chat style with which you guys are very familiar with at this point. And then we'll open very broadly for Q&A. But if you have any questions throughout, that initial part of the conversation, please put them in the chat and we'll, address them at the end in that Q&A in the order that we receive them. So don't be shy. And, Bobby mentioned something, oh, I have a question about that I don't want to forget, feel free to add it in the chat immediately. So with that, Bobby, I want to start off our conversation. I shared a little bit about, your professional background, but can you tell us, what is that story? What really brought you to be very interested in integrity and what led you to be involved in the field, especially in safeguarding in sport?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? And what it is sports have always just been a huge part of my life, right? From an athlete in early ages, played all the way up till still involved in sports today. I have two young children that play sports. And for me, the draw has always been that sports is a universal language, right? We all play. It doesn't matter where you're from, doesn't matter what you look like, it just doesn't matter. It brings people together, right? That's what I love about sports. And so for me, I saw issues with, whether it was abuse or whether there were integrity issues happening at all levels, right? From grassroots to the professional setting. So I decided about, it's been close to 10 years now of really working in sports or safeguarding from that aspects that how can we create environments where athletes and those involved feel safe, they feel like the sport is fair, right? And they want to come back every year, right? That's a goal of mine is like I like to think about especially younger athletes or people who are new to the game, like coming back a few years from now and telling stories about, how much fun they had, what they learned, how they felt supported, just all of these things that really make sure those individuals have positive experiences and then they're coming back year to year in sport, right? That's what we're here to do. So for me, getting drawn into that through the safeguarding and integrity aspect was like, hey, I can make an impact and I can make sure we start having more and more of those positive experiences, more and more of those stories about, let me tell you all of these years of fun I had in the sport of my choosing. And so, yeah, that really kind of brought me into it. And once you get in this work, right, like it definitely becomes a passion. And I just love, every day being involved in some type of sport activity. I was coaching a basketball team 2 hours ago, right? We've won our first two games this season, so I'm excited. But yeah, that kind of, watching the kids come together, the energy, watching adults participate, all those things are fantastic. So I like to contribute what I can, which is it may not be my athleticism at this point, it is I can help people have a positive, fair, supported experience throughout sports.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned that. I think sometimes, especially as we reach elite levels, and you and I have talked about this a lot, we lose sight of that in a lot of ways. And, it becomes either a job or something people have to do. What's your best advice in that? How do you keep that environment light, fun, even if you're taking it very seriously and creating these high performing environments?
Yeah, I mean that it gets tougher as we go up, right? The practices, the training, everything gets more intense. The pressure to excel gets more intense, right? And what I tell people is one, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? That's how I operate in like a professional and personal situation. Build those connections and listen to your athletes, right? Create environments where they're allowed to speak, like there's some transparency and some open communications. Because from my perspective, when I am looking at integrity and safeguarding, I want an environment where there's enough respect and safety to where they can say, hey, there may be an issue here, right? Like I may notice something that's happening to somebody else or happening to me. There may be an issue with this game or this specific event. Those are important. I think it starts with trust and transparency that then builds up kind of communications and that open world. So don't be afraid to talk, right? And don't be afraid to encourage your athletes and your administrators, your spectators, right? Make sure that they feel comfortable kind of speaking up, right? That's where integrity and safeguarding start. It's that communication, right? I said it starts with conversations at all levels, right? That includes talking with your athletes and talking with, if they're minors, with the parents and with the officials and with the administrators, building that entire community around trust and communication really does increase the chances of having positive experience. Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be easy, right? Training and competing is tough, right? It is not, I'm not saying it's a cakewalk out there, right? People are pouring their heart and soul into these sports. Our job is to make sure that they feel that safe, environment, that they feel a supported environment, that they feel it's a fair environment that keeps pulling them back to that competition.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you mentioned that because integrity, as we know, can mean so many different things in
Sure.
sport. And that's so important, for our PAQ community to understand those different layers and dimensions. That goes to fair play, safe environments, ethical leadership, et cetera, you name it, right? So,
Yeah.
how do you personally define integrity, particularly within the aquatics context? That's very important for our community to be very aware of.
Yeah, for me, I think there's a lot of ways. I talk to my young kids about what integrity means and how we apply it in different contexts. And when I think about it in sports and especially aquatics, I'm thinking it's where we as an organization and we as a sport, what we say really matches up with what we do, right? Fair play in the water, right? Ethical leadership on the deck, and a culture where people involved at all levels do the right thing, even when no one's watching, right? Like that's kind of the integrity that I want to see across the sport in all the different aspects of it, because that's where we can make sure when people are, whether it's they're competing for medals or they're just swimming because they love the sport, that they feel that safety, that respect, and they feel valued, right? And so it's not as simply as, the say what, do as I say, not as I do, right? For me, it is do as I do, right? Like we as an organization, everybody involved really can model that fair play in the water, that ethical leadership on the deck. And again, that culture where people aren't taking the easy out even when no one else is watching. And that is very, it's very relevant to a sport like any type of water sport and what we have in aquatics here at Pan Am. So
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, what drew you to Panama Aquatics? I know we had the pleasure of meeting you through our
yeah,
collaboration with ALSS as our development partner and getting you involved with our,
yeah.
second annual convention, developing everything that was related to safeguarding. But why do you feel it's such an important topic to, keep growing integrity and have it being a really important focal point within the organization at this current moment?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? Because you're looking at a guy like I'm not a swimmer, right? Like I swim it recreationally, right? But I play soccer. That's the sports that I still play today is soccer and like flag football. And so it's like, well, why are you involved in Pan Am Aquatics? Like what drew you to PAC, right? And I'm like, well, look, what I saw was an organization that's ready to kind of evolve and improve and really invest in integrity and safeguarding, right? Not because it has to, but because it wants to, right? And I see a commitment when it's either when I'm speaking, last year, the year before to people and getting and fielding the questions and seeing the interactions from the stakeholders or meeting with leadership of the organization and saying like, hey, there's a real commitment here, and that's what draws me to an organization because I like safeguarding again, it's not just a profession, it's a passion. And when I see an organization especially that has the platform that your organization has, meaning that you can like set an example across the Americas. Like that's a huge opportunity for me to really have an impact on a lot of individuals in sports. And I can't pass up on that opportunity, right? I just love that safeguarding aspect of it, that integrity aspect. Like I said, just making that safe and fair sport. And so yeah, so when I see that and see an organization that's really ready to kind of invest the time that they need to invest in what is a very, it's a very high priority, but also a difficult mission, then that's something I just can't turn away, right? Like again, sports are just a passion and safeguarding is mixed that well. So I was super excited to see the organization getting saying like, hey, we need a safeguarding officer and we want to spend the time talking about how we can make our organization like a real example of what integrity and safeguarding need to be in sports. So that, like I said, I couldn't say no or couldn't pass up the opportunity at least to say, hey, I'd love to help if I can. So, I'm excited certainly to be a part of it.
Yeah, and we're excited to have you, absolutely. And we've seen the tangible impact of this work that we've,
Yeah.
worked on together for now a while, and it's great to see that Now, as having you as our integrity officer, but even I see some of the leaders in this call who are making incredible strides to, integrating safeguarding into policy within the National Federation. I see club leaders as well here that have integrated, safeguarding ethical standards within their policies within clubs, initiatives with athletes and parents. So it's just incredible to see that, growing throughout our continent and, the now the sky's the limit, right? Like, okay, now our community is on board, our community understands. And even, we talk about safeguarding still, as this big umbrella term. Can you talk a little bit about, the breadth of integrity of the
Yeah.
work within Panem Aquatics that is so important to continue? So what areas, you believe are critical to cover and how that connects to our various stakeholders, athletes, coaches, officials, federations.
Yeah, so when I talk about integrity, when I talk about safeguarding, I like to take a step back, right, and say this is holistic approach where integrity is going to cover everything from making sure your athletes are safe, meaning they're not being subjected to some type of abuse, that competitions are fair, right, that ethics and governance are at the center of our organization, that, whether it's, looking at anti-doping or performance enhancing drugs, all of these things fall under the big umbrella of we want a safe, fair environment, right? Because if you have a safe and fair environment, people not only get pulled in, they stay, right? Because that's what we want. We always want to grow the sports and we want to retain the athletes, right? And if they feel safe, respected, valued, and that it's fair, right? You have to have all those pieces. Great. Like if you eliminate abuse in your sport, that is a wonderful step. But if they feel like then it's an unfair competition because you're not, there are integrity issues within the sport itself, you're going to lose people. Even if there are no integrity issues, but they're being subjected to potential emotional or physical abuse without an ability to speak up or report, there's going to be retention and attraction issues there as well. So you have to look at it as this whole picture because the ultimate goal is to, like I said, draw those people in and make sure that they have the type of experience to where every season they're coming back and back and back and they're ready to compete more and more and more. Not even, even if they don't win, right? Like, all right, I tried, it was fair, I'm supported. So for, in our organization, it's that looking at the whole picture, right? Because if you get that tunnel vision and just start looking at it, it's like, okay, we're looking at performance enhancing drugs, we're looking at potential betting issues, we're looking at financial issues, and we don't look at the safeguarding issues, it's a problem. If we look at just safeguarding and we don't broaden it, right, we're going to have problems if we're not looking at the integrity. So that's what's great about the code and the system in Pan Am is like, hey, this is the holistic approach to make sure that we really have the environment that we need for everybody involved, right? And so that's what's exciting is, yeah, this is, it's to me, really making sure that all these pieces kind of connect within the safeguarding integrity world, right? Because it's not just a rule book, right? Like you see the integrity book, the code, and it's like, all right, it's got to be a mindset that's shared across the board by the athletes and coaches and officials, the federations, like everything. It's all about building this system that's protecting the people and the sport, right? So we want protected people, protected sports. So they're safe and they're fair, right? And that's what's great about having this really broad integrity code that covers all of these things, right? Because it really does take that holistic approach that I think is most effective to really building what I was talking about earlier, which is like, all right, this open, this transparent environment where people are going to compete and if they see something, they say something, right? Like, hey, this may be an issue. And so I'm going to say something about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you mentioned that mindset, kind of, having that direction be that mindset for this holistic approach to integrity. And you touched a little bit on this, the key points, but can you share a little bit what's that vision that you have for the direction of integrity within Panem Aquatics? What are the priorities and where do you see those greatest opportunities for impact coming from?
Yeah, so for me at least, it's building that kind of strong, transparent, like athlete-centered integrity framework. That's what I love, right? I like it. Like you will hear me say transparency and communications multiple times because to me, without transparency, without the communication, an integrity system just isn't as effective as it should be. So really the priorities, right, was starting out with, like making sure that people understand how to report, right? Like what needs to be reported, how it needs to be reported. I'm also looking to kind of expanding like education and prevention programs from an integrity standpoint that covers everything. Like for me, an educated stakeholder base is such a good tool for accountability, right? Like making sure people understand, what is a problematic in an environment and how to report there. And it's also great to have a safeguarding officer and an integrity officer because then you start having somebody spearheading, really aligning with global practices, like whether that's through World Aquatics or through WADA. Like now you've got this kind of point of contact. So really making sure that we develop and continue to develop relationships with those other international federations and, you know, individuals like that. And then also like for me, I want to see a lot of confidence built through collaboration with stakeholders here, right? And that's exactly what we were talking about. It's like communication. It's an open door policy for me. And so I love to hear from anybody and everybody about whatever potential issues or successes they're having, right? Like problems that they're running into, successes that they say, hey, we implemented this policy and it's been great, right? I love this kind of open door communication policy because ultimately that's going to help us, one, strengthen our reporting and like management system. It's going to help us understand where we could improve in our education and preventative measures. Also, like, again, it's just celebrating the win. So for me, at least, it's developing that strong and transparent system through those measures, right? And I think we have a real kind of a real opportunity for it. And yeah, I want everybody to see any success that like the Pan Am organization has with regards to integrity as a real shared success of the people in, that make up the organization, right? Because that's what it is. It's a shared success. It's not Pan Am success and integrity is not just Pan Am success, right? It is Pan Am success because of all the stakeholders that are a part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a collective effort, right? Like what we have been discussing. And, we've seen the growth in that community and collaboration and discussions through, our events, our clinics, our convention, our certification programs. That's just been incredible to see. So, what do you recommend as being that next step as we continue to grow our programming with safe sport, with safeguarding, with integrity? A lot of the things that we're currently working on are going to come out pretty soon. So, what's your best piece of advice for our community members, when they can start engaging, with these programs more formally? How do we even start that conversation now, as to getting to these very set goals that we have for the vision of our organization?
Yeah, I mean that's always a big question, right? Is like how do we implement or how do we successfully move into these new phases? And as I told you, like I talk about communication and transparency a lot. The first part is communication, right? It is taking a look at what these new policies, what these new implementations, maybe what you're trying to do, and then use this new office as a resource, right? If you can't tell, I love talking about anything that relates to integrity, to safeguarding, to auditing, to compliance, to education, all of those things that touch on this. The goal of the integrity office is not to be just kind of an accountability tool. It is a resource, right? And so the first step is always understanding your obligation. And one of the best ways to do that is to have communications with us, right? It's like, you can email and the integrity, it's integrity at panamaquatics.com. Shoot the email. It comes directly to me because I want to engage in those conversations. I want to set the Zoom meetings. I want to understand what is or isn't working for you guys, right? Where we think something may be a very successful program, but you guys tell us like, hey, it could still use a few tweaks here, or maybe have you thought about this, right? In all honesty, we may take a step back and say, no, we didn't realize it would have this impact, right? But we never know if there's that communication, or you're having a struggle understanding this new platform or this potential implementation program. Reach out so we could help you with that guidance, and that will also help us inform your colleagues as well. So to me, it's that first step is really taking a look at what you're trying to do and then communicating with those resources you're out there. We're not in silos, right? Tearing down those barriers and helping people understand that we really do want to be more than just an accountability tool in the integrity office, right? We want to be a true resource to make the entire experience where it needs to be. So yeah, so my first step is always like, if you don't understand something, ask questions because there's a good chance that if you don't understand it, someone else doesn't either, right? And there's a good chance your question is need to be answered, and that's great. Like I said, I'll always be available through that kind of method of just just shoot me an email and we'll definitely set up meetings and we'll figure out a way to get your the support that you need to make sure we're doing what we need to do. That's I've seen from all of your stakeholders that they want to prioritize this, so I want to be there to help them to make sure that it is, as pain-free of a process as possible.
Yeah, and we truly appreciate that. And I agree with that. The excitement is there, the commitment is there, and we've seen it through our program. So that is really incredible to see. And I know you mentioned, how to communicate with you. You
Yeah.
provided the integrity email. We'll send that out as well. We'll make it available. It's currently available on our website, but we'll always have that available for you guys. And now going beyond, communication, questions, as you mentioned, if someone has a concern or wants to reach out to you for guidance, what's the process for connecting with you even before we get to reporting? Just that initial point of contact. If I have a question about XYZ, can you describe to us what that process is?
Yeah, so for me, what my certainly and what I say is my preference would be an email, right? Like at that integrity, it pushes straight to me. So I monitor it all the time. I'm like most of us are nowadays with pretty much constant contact with my email address. And that's a great way to do it, right? We'll talk a little bit more about kind of how to report, but a great way to start that communication off is, just reach out via email because then we can work on, hey, like let's schedule a call, let's schedule a Zoom meeting. How can I meet you where you're at to really have an effective conversation about a question or a concern you may have, right? Like, and that's the way to start. Don't ever hesitate to drop, an email to me. I really do believe like integrity work starts with a conversation, right? Like especially me as a new in the position, that conversation is so important. So yeah, anyone with a question, anyone with a concern, like 100% reach out via email. I think that's, doesn't matter what time of day, or what day of the week, right? Just shoot me a email and we'll get something scheduled.
Yeah, absolutely. And I put your email here in the chat for those of you who just want to copy that and have that ready to go to send Bobby that initial point of contact email. But also I want to touch on before we end this section of our conversation, if someone potentially wants to report, a potential integrity issue, whether it's about governance for sports, safe sport, or others, can you talk to us a little bit about how that reporting process works? And what they should expect once they reach out, because we already set up the anonymous reporting form and is currently available on our website. But we'd love to hear from you as to, once you open that form, what proceeds after that.
Yeah, so that's great, right? A great question to kind of set expectations. We'll start with the reporting. What was really important to me when I joined on was that there were multiple options to report, right? Because individuals may feel comfortable shooting me an email through the integrity email address that comes directly to me. We have, but that's going to potentially identify you, which is great. But that it was really important that we had an anonymous option, right? And so on the same, on our integrity webpage, there's a reporting form to a link that you press that link, it takes you to a form that asks a number of questions that helps put my office in a position to say like, okay, what are our next steps? But gives you that option to report anonymously, right? Which I think is so important. So once you kind of get online, you say, okay, I'm going to make a report. You click that, you go through your reporting form, that immediately pushes straight to me, right? As the integrity officer, I'm the one who receives and reviews those. My typical first step is going to be either reach out to the reporting party or reach out to who I would call like the identified claimant. So the person who may have been subjected to misconduct, you're going to get an email from me saying like, hey, like let's schedule a time to talk, right? Because again, and you're going to get those pretty quick. I tend to monitor these all the time and I'll turn around an email just like, hey, let's set some time to kind of talk to determine what the next steps are. Like it's very important for me that anytime somebody submits a concern, right, whether that's via email, whether it's via the reporting portal, it doesn't matter. You're going to get a response from me, and we're going to work through what the concern is and what the potential next steps should be, right? Whether that's a full investigation, there's a whole number of different things. But the one expectation that I really want people to hold Pan Am, accountable for it, you file a concern or you reach out with a concern, you're going to get a response. And there's going to be a discussion or a follow-ups like, hey, let's dig into what your concern is and what our next steps need to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And I linked the integrity page down here on the chat so you guys have it handy, and also how you can get there through our website is you go to the About section under Governance, you'll see Integrity. And that's where you'll see our integrity code and the steps to contact Bobby. You'll see the Integrity at Pan Am Aquatics email, and you'll see the steps for that anonymous report. So thank you for sharing that info, Bobby. And as we open now the conversation to the community today and even beyond, as this conversation will just continue to grow and grow, and more members will become more involved as well. What do you hope to hear from participants today
Yeah.
and from members of our community about what they want to see in our approach to integrity and safeguarding at Pan Am Aquatics?
I mean, it's kind of exactly what you just said, right? What approach do they want to see? What approach do they need, right? Like, how can we at Pan Am be the resource, right? Not only setting the expectations, enforcing rules, but how can we really figure out what they need, what's working, what's not, right? Like, how can we support them better? So that's it, right? Depending on what your comfort level is, chatting today, chatting after today, that like I really want to hear about like, hey, this is kind of this is a new frontier for us. Like, what is it that you really need? What's been working for your organization that maybe you're doing independently of Pan Am, right? You're like, hey, this is working great for us that I'd love to see mirrored, or, that's it. It's starting with that conversation, right? And so that is really, for me at least, over the next, whether it's the next couple of weeks, whether it's the next month, is really, I want to start hearing from all those stakeholders about not just the good, right? Like, oh, it is great we're having, that there's an integrity officer in place. And I love to hear from people again, like all the successes they have, but also what's not working, right? Like I am a fresh set of eyes kind of coming in. And it's an opportunity to kind of hit a bit of a refresh, a restart button. Like, all right, let's kind of start with this blank slate and see what we can do from here. And it's exciting because of that, but it works best when we're engaging in those dialogues, when we're talking, right? When it's not just one person dominating the decisions or the conversation, but it really is a community like mentality and a group impact. That's how we have a successful kind of safeguarding and integrity setup in a sport and, in an environment like this. So yeah, so I want to hear from people. Like that's what I want. I want to, the biggest message out from today is like, hey, we're here now and we want to hear from you. Like that's step one.
Yeah, and on that note, we open up the conversation with you guys, especially the ones that are here on the call, and the ones that are going to be listening to this at a later time. The channels of communication, as we just mentioned, remain wide open. So the conversation doesn't end here. But for those here in the call, we want to give you the opportunity to ask Bobby questions, engage in conversation as to all these topics that we just discussed. We're going to guide it a little bit. So feel free if you want to have your cameras on, if that feels comfortable to you. If you just want to unmute to ask that question, we just ask if you can just raise your hand, or, if you also want to submit questions in the chat, that'll be great, so that I know who to call on if you have any questions. So yeah, so Henry has a question. Henry, go ahead.
Yeah, hi Bobby. Nice to meet you, and well, welcome to the family. Congratulations for your appointment. I've been involved with Panama Aquatics for quite a while, also a former swimmer, and yeah, I have a background in sport ethics and integrity. And what it comes to mind right now, because you were sharing with us, yeah, educational strategies are basically something that you can use as a tool to then ask for accountabilities to associations and member federations. But at the same time, within the community, we are at different levels, because if you go and look to the US and Canada, they have already a system in place that works totally perfect. And probably the interventions that we might have, like a working group, because this is like a lot of people on the background, it will be probably not that much invested in trying to help them, but just to support them. But where you have some other countries that probably they don't have any system in place. And if you go and see on their probably legislations or the I don't know bylaws, you might not see the word safeguarding safe sport at all.
Yeah.
So uh, taking education as a baseline to have everyone the same ground, amazing. But also, how can we and what would be your proposal to reach to these organizations that will just going to be backing themselves on well, just probably giving a lot of resistance. And how can we work as a community, as Panama Aquatics, to reach to these countries where we don't have anything in place, but to embed the safeguarding culture within these countries, regardless of the amount of people they have within their federations?
Yeah, so that's like a great question and kind of a great insight, right? Because it's true, right? You have certain countries that are further along for a number of different reasons with regards to their safeguarding. What I like to do is use what has worked in those countries and kind of what you said, the first and one of the most important parts is that educational baseline, right? Like assuming that we're all kind of starting from the same spot. But then the other piece is as a community, it's supporting those groups, right? Really making sure they understand why safeguarding and integrity has to be central to their organization, right? To try to get that buy-in. And then once they say, okay, right, like we agree, like we want to like really build this out, right? It's then being that resource to them, not just the integrity office, but potentially the community as well, right? Like, similarly situated organizations that may be slightly more advanced with their integrity or safeguarding, like really understanding this is a shared responsibility and goal. I will always be that kind of point person to say, hey, if you ever have a question, reach out to me. Like I've developed and worked with systems from the grassroots to the international level to groups that have no safeguarding and integrity to groups that we're refining a system that's been in place for 10 years. So it's understanding that the resource is there, that it will be there for you regardless of what kind of evolution or stage you are in the integrity aspect of it and reach out. But then also you kind of share that burden and goal because it gives that kind of sense of community and buy-in. So yes, education baseline, but it's also making sure your colleagues and partners understand what is working, what isn't, where they may be at, where if you've been there before, how did you get out of that stage or that space with regards to safeguarding it? It's again shifting that mindset to this is really a community effort. And it's not easy, right? Like I can't say like, oh, we can flip a switch or snap our fingers and all of a sudden a great integrity framework is in place in organizations that haven't had one before. But it's making sure those organizations understand why it's important, how it's going to help their organization grow and maintain their athletes, and then also that there are so many resources and so many support systems in their membership in Pan Am, right? Like how much is there? But that also is kind of a call to action to all of those organizations that may be a little bit more advanced. Like, hey, you guys are also leaders in this space, and I want to see as much involvement as I can get out of them and really kind of assisting their peers and their colleague organizations that may need a little of assistance because we've all been there, right? Like even organizations now that have a more advanced or evolved safeguarding or integrity system, they didn't start there, right? They started, with little to nothing, but we can get to the more evolved. So it's all about communication and that community shared goal. So I say like, yeah, my goal as an education standpoint is to build that base understanding for everybody. So everybody understands what integrity and safeguarding is and why it's important. That starts the buy-in, then it's working with them and just meeting people where they're at to say, hey, like I don't have any expectations as to what your safeguarding system may be. I'm going to work with you where you are to try to improve it to the point where we can say, hey, you've got a great integrity and safeguarding system in place.
Yeah, and thank you, Henry. That was a great question, and thanks, Bobby, for adding on. And if I may, like we have the systems in place to support you guys. Like you have our full support every step of the process, especially, the people involved in our, club and national federation certification programs. You have direct access to, our program, which Bobby, was a great pillar of developing that Safe Sport program. And through our Underwater Chats Power Up Lab initiative, you have the opportunity to even set up one-on-one consulting sessions with our team, and where we provide very individualized support to whatever you guys need. And if that is, baby steps, if that's, starting from scratch, we go from there. If that's a program that's already set in place and you need our advice or support or, sounding board, at that point, we are more than happy to be that resource as well. So as Bobby mentioned, we're gonna meet you guys where you guys are at. And it's that two-way street of communication and knowing, what you need from us. And that's where we'll be able to provide that support. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. Anyone else that has a very specific question? You can raise your hand, send it in the chat. If not, I can, guide our conversation a little bit with some of the things that Bobby mentioned earlier on in the conversation. Okay, so no specific questions, so I'll go ahead. So, one of the things you asked Bobby, is what does integrity mean to people? So do you want to ask our participants, guide them in that discussion as to, how are we defining integrity and how are we implementing that in our different organizations?
Yeah, so I love it, right? And that's one of the benefits of like these kind of communications. What I ask people is like, look, what does integrity mean to you in kind of a two-part question, right? I want to ask you like specifically what when you hear the word integrity, right, what does it mean to you, right? Like what is your general definition of integrity with regards and just you can drop that in the chat. And if you drop it in the chat, I'd love to like I'll see your name, but put in like little parentheticals, maybe like what organization you're with specifically. But then also, take the time to drop into the chat just a couple words about not just what integrity in general means, but then what does integrity mean to you with regards to competition within Pan Am, right? So like in the aquatics world. So it's kind of a two-part question. That's what I like people to kind of take. All right, so here's what I think of when I think of integrity, right? If I ask my 9-year-old, it's like it's doing the right thing when no one's watching, right? That's his favorite example of what integrity is. And I think it's a great definition of it. So I'm like, perfect. I'll take that definition. But then how would you apply that to sport itself, right? What does that mean to you? Had specific examples, right? Not just, well, it means doing the right thing in sport when no one's watching. Well, great. Like, what are some of those things you'd be doing the right way when no one's watching, right? Like, tell me a little and just drop it in the chat because I'm curious, right? Just to hear or read what people think of when they hear integrity, right? Because it's usually all over the place, right? Like you'll have, just a number of different ways. So yeah, so just drop those in the chat. I'd love to see just in general, so, just a few people saying like, hey, this is what integrity means to me.
Yeah, so go ahead, write those in the chat, even if it's in Spanish, happy to share that with Bobby and translate it to English. So all good.
Yeah, no one on this call wants to hear me attempt to speak Spanish. I certainly have a rudimentary value of it, but being from the South, it is not understandable. I'm going to be honest with you.
Great. So I added mine, being a great teammate,
Yeah,
from an athlete perspective. I think that's a great way to start. Henry says having a values-based approach. That's awesome. Anyone else want to share their thoughts?
I see Kathy's got her hand up. So
Yes, go ahead.
I wanted to go back to the questions if it was all right with you, Val and Bobby.
Of course.
So, hi, Bobby. Welcome. Super glad to have you here. My name is Kathy Fish, and I'm one of the swimming representatives from the United States. I do apologize for being late, just got done with a swim meet. But I did want to ask you, again, coming from Safe Sport, if we are looking to implement the same type of athlete protection training for 18-year-olds and higher, with it being for athletes, officials, coaches, anybody who is actually coming in contact with our athletes, and if that's something that you're going to be spearheading.
yeah, so that's a great question, right? For me, at least, that's a goal that we always meet is determining who needs to be educated and what education they need, right? And so starting off, when you get to adults who have in regular contact or authority, not only over minors, but to me, over athletes in general, right? Whether it's an adult or a minor athlete is very important. So yeah, so that's definitely always a topic of discussion. Education is a key point for me. I think it creates a community of accountability, right? So when you talk about safeguarding, the more people you educate, the more tools of accountability you have, right? So you educate everybody in your community about what is appropriate conduct, what isn't appropriate conduct, and what you do if you see something that may be inappropriate. All of a sudden, your spectators, your parents, your athletes, your officials, they start holding each other accountable. I can think of a number of examples where when we were educating the stakeholders, like that directly led to people like addressing issues, right? Like small issues. And to me, the better educated stakeholders are, the more what I'll say, like kind of upstream we get, right? Like we start addressing issues earlier and earlier in the safeguarding process, which ultimately creates that safer environment. So for me, I'm always an advocate of education, but I'm also an advocate of like targeted education, meaning being intentional of who needs to be educated, but also what do they need to be educated with, right? Like how can we best use people's time to improve their base knowledge is really important, right? Because at the center, that's some of the questions and concerns we receive. Is like, all right, like what course do I take? Who takes it? How often do I take it? Is it applicable to me? Is it applicable to everybody? That intentionality, it can take a little bit of time to build out, but those are the types of conversations and directions that I like to implement because to me at least, that's extremely effective in building an integrity and safeguarding system, right? Like I tell people all the time, like we've got an office, let's say you have an office of 20 individuals that are working, which we don't, right? But like at the center, you have 100 people working, but you're working with 12 million people in the Olympic movement, educating that whole base turns, it just amplifies your reach. So yeah, so you'll hear me, if you've ever sat in like a training that I've done or you see one, almost every training I do has a slide in it that says educate, 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 right? Across three, because it's so important. Then I list out like how it's not just about educating your staff or not just your administrators or not just your coaches or not just your officials. It's a real like as many people as we can educate, whether it's mandatory or voluntary, depending on the role that they're in is just paramount to really building the foundation of just accountability on all levels. So yeah, so you'll hear me hopefully more and more in the future talk about like, hey, here are different training initiatives, different programs that we're going to have out because even in my like with my consulting business, it is just one of the things like you have to educate everybody that's involved, right? Like, the center, for example, has free training for parents and youth athletes. And I'm always like, make sure your stakeholders know it, right? Whether they like just make that available to them. So yeah, so that'll just be an ongoing theme in just everything the integrity office does is just like, hey, education is key. People need to know what is and isn't acceptable and what to do and that it's safe to report. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Bobby. And if I may, I can provide a little bit of update on what our development office is doing, Kathy. So, with the support of Bobby through it all, even before he was appointed integrity officer, we have a lot that has already been developed and a lot of new things that are coming up that started this summer. So we currently have, our convention is a big portion of our education with integrity that spans throughout our members. So that goes to leadership with governance, that goes to athletes, coaches, technical officials with fair play, safe sport. And then we have our underwater chats that has been like very highly focused on safe sport. But now as today's session, we're focusing on integrity very broadly to provide these definitions more clearly. Then we have the club and national federation certification program that of course is divided coaches and for the national federation side, leaders and technical officials. So that has been very targeted as to the types of conversations around integrity that have been very kind of application specific. So those topics have been covered very widely in those programs. And now having you involved with the newest programs that are going to be launched next year that are discipline specific programs, we have an integrity section within those programs that cover all the things specific to the person's certification track that they will choose based on their role. So integrity will be very targeted in that way, education for integrity. And then we haven't announced it officially yet, but we do have a very general safe sport program that will be, applied for our events, so that we ensure that, within our competitions, we ensure that everyone on deck has had the proper safe sport training, so that we have, that environment where we all have our understandings, collective also commitment to upholding safe environments for our athletes across roles.
And, that's just a great question in general, because it allows me to springboard and say, this feeds into that conversation I want to have, like that Pan Am wants to have, is like, great, like here's what training we're working on. What else do y'all want to see? What else would you benefit from? What are you seeing? Are there gaps? Are there trainings that are really working well, right? Like those things, that type of communication is exactly what helps us create all the tools and resources you guys can benefit from.
Exactly. And for us, any ideas you give us, us, we'll run with it. So, anything that is helpful for you guys, we are more than glad to develop, even if it's very context specific. We have had even, I know leaders in this call currently that have asked for us to develop resources specifically for them. And we have done that because that's, why we're here for, and we're, here to support and provide those resources. So please, email us, chat with us, whatever you all need and how we can best support. That's how we can keep growing our programs. So yes, please stay tuned. A lot of different trainings coming your way and opportunities for that. So thank you for that great question, Kathy, and thank you for all that you do as well. So we really appreciate you. Any other questions you guys have? Before we hop to the last couple questions, because this hour went by super quickly. I just looked at the time. So anyone has any specific questions? I know I see a lot of leaders from national federations that want to put you on the spot, but this is a great opportunity to ask a question you have, in relation to governance or anything that you might be interested in. Don't want to put anyone on the spot, but any pressing questions before I ask my last question to Bobby? Okay. So, Bobby, my last question to you before we wrap up this conversation is, as we continue to move forward and, we'll have these resources available, we'll have these trainings available, what is that message and what is that opportunity that you want to transmit to our members as to how do we take advantage of all of this, right? Because there's a lot going on. We do have a lot of resources already, existing out there that they can start engaging with. What is that best approach to make use of those resources and then taking the step from, education to implementation?
Yeah, so for me, it's understanding what resources are out there now. So take the time to look, right? And if you're not sure where to look, or you're not sure, where to go, then reach out to one of us, right? Because we'll point you in the right direction. We'll give you every resource that we have, right? And for then, it's like it's doing exactly what we've been talking about this whole time. It is like we're here to help. That's it, right? Like we are here to help. So ask your questions. If you don't understand, if you like, I have taught classes on how to implement policy changes, right? Like that's what we're here to do, right? It is not just to say, okay, there's an integrity complaint that comes in, we're going to take care of that. Yes, we will, 100%. And as I mentioned, any integrity complaint will be treated as a priority. But we are also here as a resource, and that all starts with that kind of communication and understanding that the organization is here to help you, right? We're here to help you in all these different aspects. Do not be afraid to ask questions. It's you hear the things of like, well, there's no silly question. The only silly question is the ones not asked. And that sounds childish, but it is one of those things where I've learned that if you have a question about something, odds are there are multiple others with the same question, right? And so that informs us as well as to what additional resources or guidance we can provide to the community. So that's it. It's understanding that we're here to help. Do not hesitate to reach out, right? Whether it's as simple as, where are these resources you're talking about? Or like, hey, have you seen this type of prevention policy or this type of integrity policy go into place? What's been the impact, right? Any and all questions we're here to help with. So don't view, especially the integrity position, as just this accountability tool of, okay, I'm going to report something. Yes, report. Like that is a huge priority for us. But I don't want you to lose the resource that we are here to be as well, right? And so that, that's kind of the ending message is like, don't take that for granted, right? Like, it's there when you have a whole organization and potentially a community there to support you. Let's take advantage of it, right? Because I say, high tide, lifts all ships kind of thing. We're in this together, and the work that we do will improve everybody, right? So your win is our win. Our win is your win, right? And so that's the kind of mentality, that communication, that community relationship that I really want to see and that I have seen. But just kind of understanding the integrity office and what I want it to be and what Pan Am is really wanting it to be, which is that not only accountability but resource tool as well.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that. And I think it's important for everyone also to know is that the development office is working very closely with Bobby as well. So, that connects to the larger mission at Pan Am Aquatics. It's truly an organization mission to further integrity across all aquatics in the continent. So know that, our athletes committee is, highly involved with connecting with Bobby, supporting our athletes, how we can best turn that into development efforts. Our development office is incredible. We have a lot of conversations, and we're, partnering up to create all of these resources, even for other topics, even if we're talking even about nutrition and strength training and all of these other things, integrity still comes in the question. If we're talking about governance, that also comes into play. So just know that all of these departments are working together at Pan Am Aquatics to best serve you all. So know that even if it's a development question, if integrity comes into place, that'll be there. So know that that is highly in the process of it. So with that, Bobby, thank you so much for being here with us today. I don't know if you want to leave a lasting message, as we go into the weekend to use, this conversation and think through, how we can best incorporate this into our organizations and start the week off on the right note.
Yeah, so it's my appreciation for not only everybody on the call, but everybody who's going to review the recording, understand that I am available, right? And I look forward to hearing from, again, people on the call, people who are watching this recording, and want to leave it with, from an integrity standpoint, every small step matters. So every time we make a positive change, as small as it may seem, is so important from an integrity standpoint. I can tell you the impact that you can have as an individual, as an athlete, as an official, like all of that stuff adds up. So don't minimize the importance and the impact that you can have. And any questions, anything I can do to help, please reach out to me, via email, and let's chat.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Bobby. Thank you, everyone, for engaging in this great conversation for another great underwater chats. So thank you so much. So great to see you all, and we'll stay in touch and continue the conversation. Great to see you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.